Well, welcome. All right, so we've got a special show for you guys today. This is part 2 of what we're kind of calling RealTalk. We haven't come up with a name for it yet, but essentially what this is an open discussion with experienced professionals within our industry, within the wind industry, as we talk about things that are happening right now. We really want to open some discussions up. We'd like to create some thought leadership here and find out, can we solve really what we see in our industry as some major growth that has a cause and effect, and what does that mean to us? Are we moving too fast? Are we not paying attention to things? Where are we doing well, where we're not? I'm going to be back in about 30 seconds. I'm going to introduce my guest to you guys all today. It's going to be a great show, awesome panel. I cannot wait for you guys to get involved. Let us know what you think as we're going live. Hashtag live if you're watching, and start dropping questions. At the end, we will do a Q&A and let you guys ask some questions to our panel. Donnie, roll us in. We'll be back in 30 seconds. Awesome. Hey, welcome everyone. Thank you very much for being here again today. Joshua, good to see you. John, good to see you. Jared, good to see you, sir. Thank you guys all for joining today.
Thanks for having me, Rigo.
Thank you for having us, Rigo.
Absolutely. So as we kind of get started, I want to give you guys just a real quick, kind of come back to what we were talking about here today, and we had a pre-discussion on this, and I'm excited about this conversation and topic. But essentially, what we've been talking in this series is a cradle-to-grave discussion. And one of the things that I wrote is I said, as an industry, we've seen tremendous growth over the last few decades. And so my question to you guys in this pre-discussion was regarding this aspect of cradle-to-grave, and what are we trading responsibility for liability? And I know that this can be a touchy subject. And so I asked each of you guys to be here because of your expertise from the service and fulfillment side, from an OEM side, and from an asset owner side in your time within this industry. So I want you guys to go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience. I'll start with you, your right corner, and you can just give us a little insight on who you are and where you're from. And then we'll go down the line. We'll go John, we'll go Josh, and then we'll go Jared.
All right. By background, I'm an aerospace engineer. I started into wind 25-ish plus years ago. Spent over 20 years in the production of wind turbine blades from the engineering. Ran service for the Americas for a couple of years, and then moved into regional quality for a large manufacturer. So I've got from feet on the ground and lots of time spent up tower during the service issues to what goes on in production and what the customers are looking for, how they're scoring us at the end of the day.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Mr. Josh Rangel.
Josh Rangel, President and CEO of Rangel Renewables. I started the business back in 2016, but my background is conventional power with power plants, more specifically Southern Company out in Meridian, Mississippi, on an integrated gasification combined cycle. But more specifically, the last 3 years, been truly operating as a wind company, so headquartered here in Houston. And once again, look forward to the conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you, Josh. I appreciate it. Mr. Jared?
Yeah, thanks, Rigo. John, Josh, looking forward to the conversation. But just a quick intro from my side, Jared Wallert. Probably relevant for the discussion, right, is my wind experience, 12 plus years in wind with Acciona Energy, Eon. and then RWE. Had experience with operations, engineering, and asset management leadership functions. For the last 9 months, hadn't been in wind, but definitely focused on the renewable side with renewable natural gas, where I'm the COO of Brightmark's RNG division. So looking forward to the conversation.
Fantastic. And I want to take a quick second. I want to thank our sponsor, Airtonomy, for putting this on. I love what they're doing right now in the industry when it comes to data capture, analyzation, and the drone capture aspect of what they're doing. They are changing the way that things are happening right now in the industry, and I'm excited to be a part of some programs with them. And I also want to make sure that you guys understand that when we invite our guests here, it is important you understand that we're asking them to come here from their experience. These are personal conversations that we're having here with an open aspect. We want to be authentic, but none of these reflect their positions that they had within their previous companies. But they do have the experience to speak on the aspect of asset ownership, OEM, manufacturing, and services. And we want to open these discussions because the hope is that as a community, as an industry, we become stronger, better, and we can start moving forward in the right direction. You know, in comparison, we had this conversation, Jared, in our pre-call. You know, as an industry, if we look at all the others, we're quite young. We're a baby industry, and we're grabbing as many best practices as we can. But I believe we still have a lot to learn. Would you agree?
Oh yeah. So, over 25 years, as I've mentioned before, it's I haven't seen the real growth of technology, the changes that keep us from designing, manufacturing, and using the same mistakes repeated over and over. Whether it's leading edge protection system, lightning protection systems, there are mistakes being made out there now in products delivered to the field that just flat out will not last for the lifetime of the product, the advertised lifetime of the product. And as we've chatted earlier, this is previously, we've grown so fast. You know, as the rotor diameters are increasing, it's much quicker to market to take your existing design and make it longer. There's sure you got some stresses and laminates to play with, but the overall function and design of the subsystems is the same. It's much longer to get to market a completely new product, and so that may be why we're still stumbling over the same mistakes. But after 25 years, come on, guys, let's go.
So I had a question raised to me by another professional in the industry, and he made a comment. He came from another side. He came from a completely different industry. He's brand new into the renewable section. And one of the things he brought up to me, and I'd love each of your guys' opinion on this. I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I want your feedback and your take on this. And we'll start with you, Josh, and we'll move around. But he said, there seems to be a lot of serial defects and a lot of consistency in failures, assets not lasting as long as they're as promised, from blades, drivetrains, you name it. But seems to be a consistent amount of failures and an expected amount of failure rate coming from owners and owner operators when purchasing these. And he said if this was a different industry, this would have been looked at as an aspect of neglect. And I mean, these manufacturers could be sued by the buyers for the simple fact that they're not creating a product that has a lower failure rate. And so when we come into renewable, I've had conversations with other owners that say that they absolutely expect that. And they already have put in place preparation for that, even though it's not as promised, right? That's not how they purchased it. These things aren't supposed to happen. And so, Josh, from your experience from an ISP side, this probably is a good thing for you, right? This creates business for you. This creates opportunity. I mean, how do you view it from the side where you're benefiting?
Yeah, no, great question. So, of course, in the industry, even working within the largest, 3 OEMs and what we do, there are, aspects of the business where you're looking at the warranties, you're assessing which towers we're going to hit first and what that's going to look like overall. because of course the scope of work usually is going to be the same. But in that regard, right, we look at it and say, hey, how can we improve the ROI, reduce cost, but also with the anticipation, knowing that these towers will go down and what that looks like. And so we, in discussions with the owners, developers, EPCs, what can we do to mitigate, but also improve that technology when we are, in discussions with manufacturers that are doing the generators or gearboxes and things of that nature. So really is intriguing in that regard, because I know, as OEMs, it's let's pull out, production and let's get these towers up and running, and let's get, as many towers as we can up. But in the same token, what it is going to be in the next 2-3 years when you have blades that are failing, or in certain circumstances, a blade gets struck by lightning, and, anticipation of getting those tested so that we can either get them swapped out and different things of that nature.
Jarrett?
There you go. Yeah. Hey, really good thoughts, Josh. I like them. I would say, just to build on this as well, right? When you hear the framing that Rigo used, right, in regards to another industry, someone coming into the wind, obviously there's a different standard that they're looking at, right? So I think we can really leverage that perspective and say, is there room for growth within kind of the wind sector as we look at the other industries? And a lot of the other industries that we then benchmark ourselves against have been around for a while. And so there have been an evolution of standards and evolution of expectation. And again, maybe a few dynamics that may be not necessarily a one-for-one for the wind. With that being said, though, right, there is a view, right, and there's a bit of back and forth, and depending on which owner-operator you talk about, is how they view lifetime calculations, failure rates, review what their blade repair strategy is, even the due diligence that is being done on the front end of the purchase and all the way through kind of the manufacturing process as well. And so are there defects that we've seen as an industry? Absolutely. Are there ways to mitigate that? You can through the TSAs and the agreements back and forth. Is there room for improvement? I would argue yes. But is it as catastrophic, or is it as good as some would say, right? And there's many different perspectives on this. I think we have to look at it from more of a holistic picture. So Rigo, just teasing it out a little bit in regards to maybe some other perspectives we can pick up, but want to at least frame it that I think there's typically, when we do some comparisons, it may not be a full one-for-one, but it definitely leads us to, is there a better improvement that can be made? And I think that's going to be more of an industry-wide exploration there as well.
Jared, do you think the owners want to make that improvement, understanding that it's going to come at some cost?
Yeah, John, I think it depends, right, on who you talk to within the owner operators, right? We often think through there's one voice, but for every owner operator, right, there's going to be even tensions within the owner operator perspective. And it's a healthy tension from my perspective, right? The developers are going to have their view on really ensuring that the growth occurs, right? The construction team is going to have their own drivers, the engineering team and the operations team. And so when you talk to the individuals who actually feel more of the bumps and bruises along the way during the operational side and getting it commissioned, I think you're going to hear a very resounding, hey, we need to improve here. But when you look at the other dynamics at play, right, with the financials, the growth aspects, et cetera, I think there's other views that will then come into play that then colors a full holistic operations or owner operator perspective. So John, I'm not trying to punt the topic, but I do think it's important to understand that even within owner operators, there are many different perspectives and tensions that exist. And I think that those tensions are a healthy dynamic. And that even broadens out as you look at the industry, that there's always going to be tensions between owner operators, EPCs, OEMs, and ISPs as well.
So some customers will accept the fact that they've got defects given. I want to put this, as we're talking about, we're still a immature industry compared to others. I need to relay something from the automotive industry before quality really took over. There was a supplier for GM, and I'll just paraphrase here. The line was stopped due to known defects going out the door, and the manager restarted the line, telling the quality manager that, hey, our customers expect defects in the vehicles. Let's give them what they want. And so as crazy as that sounds, that's gone now from the automotive industry. If you live that standard, you will not survive. So what do we need to do? Hearing that some owners will accept it the way it is, and some owners do want an improvement in the product to be there. What can we do to help force that forward? And again, this is my perspective, saying that I want the industry to have a better product out there. You know, the defects and the damages I'm seeing are known causes, and we can stop this. Is there a, do we have to go to standards to force this out? Or can the marketplace force us forward?
Yeah, I would like to hear Josh's perspective, and as we tee him up, right, I think we have to look at it that my perspective is there's not a silver bullet here. So do I think standards has a role to play? I do, right, and that was a big discussion point when I was the chair of the operations committee for ACP, right? That was a big just discussion point of what is the role of standards? How do we do that well and make sure that all the different voices and the tensions are heard within the industry? I think the other dynamic is, right, owner operators, they're the ones that are paying the bills at the end of the day. So how are they making their votes heard through the way that they spend money, right? And I think that's a dynamic that we need to think through. And then as well, I mean, the supply chain will have its own kind of financial tensions as they look to optimize, obviously, their bottom line. I mean, we're all in business, so it is about making money. And also a role that we have that they have to play in regards to the quality, right? And so there's this balancing act that is occurring. But again, I don't think there's a silver bullet. I think there's several different sides to this discussion. And I think to see holistic improvement, you're going to have to see holistic change throughout the value chain. And that would include standards as well. Josh, would love to hear your perspective.
Yeah, no, of course. Great question, John. So, you know, when I look at where we're at as a business, you have to assess what's happening economically from the macro and micro, and just more specifically as recent, the Inflation Reduction Act, right? You have the project tax credit. So if I'm an owner operator or a developer and saying, hey, I got to pump out, 500 megawatts of power, and we got to, provide clean energy by 2030 or 2050. Yes, the narrative is going to be, we have to make sure that these towers are out and getting stacked out. And so from that perspective, really, they are driving that narrative of, if I got to have 2, 3, 4,000 towers out in the Midwest, then it's going to come down to the EPCs providing that production timeframe and saying, okay, hey, this is what we need to get out. Now, going back to the conversation of defects and knowing that these are going to have failures, at that point, we're trying to get project tax credits. We have a time frame between 2030 and 2050 where different companies are going to have their metrics of what they need to do to decarbonize, for the atmosphere and the globe. So then it trickles down into the ISPs and saying, hey, a company like Rangel Renewables to provide safety, quality, production, saying, guys, we have to look at the footprint of what we're doing as a whole, because yes, we want to provide that quality to our customers, but in the same token, I want all of our men and women in the field going back home to their loved ones. And so it's kind of at times a rock and a hard place, right? Because when you land a project, you're trying to get these towers stacked out, but in the same token, you have to make sure that, once again, you're protecting our staff out in the field and what that looks like. So from a broad scale, you have to really look at what that looks like, from a market perspective.
Josh, and thank you for that answer. And it's really great to hear the perspective of both sides, right? As an entrepreneur, Josh, your focus is to solve problems for your customers. And so in these types of situations, you're looking at the best way to provide the best service at the safest method doing it and become as effective and most cost efficient always. Otherwise, we're not going to be in business. But
Right.
You brought up a good point, and you talked about, the aspect of tax credits. So we are in an industry that has a lot of politics that revolve around it, And so all of us are a part of this for multiple reasons. Myself being a small business owner in this industry, but been in the industry since 2008, I came into this to work and then became in love with what we're doing as a whole, as a community, creating a more sustainable future for everybody. But as we look at this, we have only a few decades of an industry that we have the ability to learn lessons from. And we look at a lot of things that have happened with repowering. Are we truly learning, or have we just had the opportunity to hit a giant reset button and start over with possibly a different way of doing things to create more megawatts, to bring better production, to have more efficiency, but pushing things out too fast and not really having to pay the consequence for making bad decisions 2 decades ago. And I think this is a really touchy subject, but did we help ourselves as an industry, giving everybody the opportunity to reset? I think this is a good one, and I want to line it up this way. What are the true cause and effects in our industry right now for us not really being more focused on a long-term view? Who wants to take that one?
I'll make a preliminary assumption. Are we using the data available to us? The data's there. I should say the information is there. Are companies, from owners, operators, back up through manufacturing, looking at that information, using the data to better inform their judgments going forward, both in production designs and techniques, to servicing, which teams are performing, which teams repairs last more than a year, which ones make it 8 years, and then how the assets being operated at the end of the day. The data's all there. The cradle-to-grave data. This is my heart and soul. There's a lot of information there. I have my opinions, but I'd like to hear, do we think the owners, operators are using the data?
Yeah, and John, I think it depends on the owner operator, right? It's, the size of the owner operator, I think, matters. And what I mean by that is when you have a bigger fleet, you have a little bit more capital to deploy for some of the data, the structure, the data strategies, right? And so you can kind of build out some of the infrastructure there. You can also bring in maybe a bit more engineers to look at some of the dynamics. What's the data telling you, and how can we now loop that into a better decision? And so again, I think some owner operators out there are quite advanced when you look at kind of long-term using the data to make more informed decisions, which then drive quality assurance, better procurement decisions, better agreement structures. But as an industry, do I think that that's an area that we have significant growth in? And again, I've been out for a few months, but I would dare to say that we probably haven't cracked that nut over the last 9 months. And so how do we then focus as an industry? And standard could be a role to play as well. Maybe some more sharing forms, benchmarks, et cetera. But I do think that there's further opportunities to use that data, and maybe even pulling in some of the information from Europe, who has had longer operating assets as well, and just see what we're missing and what that data is showing us for better decisions moving forward.
This is an area that I think you guys would agree can become sticky, right? Because we know that some do and some don't. Now, let's add one more layer to that. Look at how we behave in the US in comparison to Europe. So, right, the way that the European model is versus the way that we have our business models here in the US, does that simple aspect of their long-term planning really come into play as to what they're learning as an industry in that part of the world versus the way we're learning here in the US? And coming from a perspective of really on the outside now, I've been out of a lot of these asset discussions and industry topics that are really changing the the process of how purchases are happening, how these power purchase agreements are happening. I mean, I've been out of the operations side for about 5 years. And in just that time, what I was looking and working on, which was the just breaking into that 2 megawatt platform, has almost become obsolete in just 5 years time. And so I'm looking at this going, seeing what's happening with blades has been a big topic lately, and looking at the amount of serial defects and failures, the fact that it seems like we are just pushing the boundary on everything. Can we as a community really have a discussion that says, where does it start? Does it start with the OEM saying we're just not okay with bringing substandard? We need time. We need time to really understand that this asset is going to perform as expected without pushing things on a digital front to make it produce more that it wasn't really designed to do? Or is it from the asset owner side that says we want more development, we want slower builds so that things are done correctly? You know, is it the vendor? Is it the ISPs, the contractors that are coming in saying, we're going to give you a true bid and we're not going to put this up in that short amount of time? It just seems like, and we discussed this a little bit earlier, but for me, it's a chicken, egg discussion. And it seems like we can go around in a circle. John, I'd like to ask and start with you on this, but where could the responsibility lie, or where should it start? And I know this is a wide open discussion, and that's why I'm asking you guys, but where could it start? Who could start the process of creating a standardization that says we can be better and have a better performing asset that hits the market?
Creating a standardization is always a struggle, as from the manufacturing side. My IP is my IP, and I'm not going to share what the standard could be because I got my IP, which I think is better than the standard anyway. So that gets to be, and I'm referring back to discussions on lightning systems and leading edges, both, where the standard is there for lightning systems and the standard's not good enough. It's not demanding enough, especially on the testing side. As far as forcing a standard to be created, from a business, the point of view, insurance companies. I'm a little surprised that some turbines designed can still be put into the field insured when there is known issues with them. And as we're jumping up into larger tower heights for lower wind resource areas and longer blades, we're stepping into a whole new realm of lightning. Your susceptibility to the amount of strikes, your exposure to lightning, put it that way, is a function of the tower and blade combined, and it's not linear. I believe I could be wrong about this, but the surface of a sphere is what you're looking at. And so that's dramatically higher. We're getting into a new term of, what are they calling it now? Mega energy strikes, where we're seeing frequencies in the lightning strikes starting to approach a microwave, which is a whole different method of handling the system that the standard does not account for. So it's on the producer's, my point of view, but there should be a market force, and perhaps insurance is one avenue to force that to happen.
I didn't even think about honestly, that one didn't even come across my mind. Jared, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think John's pulling on a thread that's important, right? I mean, insurance is a player that has a voice, right? And so they are the way that certain companies, actually all companies, mitigate the risks that we're dealing with, right? And so again, they can, and I think will, signal when certain risks are not acceptable from their perspective. And I think that voice will probably be heard and continue to be heard in the discussion, right? Certain owner operators I know have had this discussion in the past. So I think that's a key part. And I think the other aspect is also defining what success looks like from a quality perspective, right? And so I think each one of us, if we were to go around and define success, may have a quite different view in regards to what's acceptable and what's not. And I think really harmonizing around what that success criteria looks like, and again, shopping that around and making sure there's consistency, or at least understand the differences across the stakeholders, will also kind of flesh this out, right? What is acceptable for failure rates? What's acceptable for blades? What we're seeing, right, and what I've seen in the past does have a concern. But I think the other argument to be made here is, as an industry, we're growing. As an industry, we're providing renewable generation. And so the growth is quite exciting to see. You are seeing the impact of the industry overall. And so there's a very good aspect to this. But where this value for me is in the discussion is do we have the right standard in regards to failure rates, expectations, et cetera? I'm just not convinced that we have a common view as we talk through that, right?
I
And
agree.
either
I agree.
have that view.
Yeah.
I agree. And I think that this has a lot to do with a comment that John said in regard to the fact that, well, this is my IP is my IP. Last month, we had a discussion in part one of this, and we talked a little bit about that. And what we found in that conversation was that, that there's still a battle there. There was a group that I know still goes on within the wind industry. They changed their name a few years ago. It was an owner-only discussion. They meet up. I was with an owner at a time when I went to that the first time, and what I found was there was some good discussion, but everybody kept everything very close to the chest because this is still a competitive market. And although the owners are all getting together, hoping to learn best practices, there was only a few, pioneers that would be willing to kind of reach out. But after a couple of years of this, with no one else inputting in, it almost seems like they're not really getting anywhere because no one's willing to really open that up. There was a comment made that really, they said that, I believe that this comes down to the data crunching folks, right? The third parties out there that are collecting information who can share from a perspective of the third party. I think there's some truth to that. But then, of course, that's a business. So how much will they share in comparison? I mean, they have to create a way to generate revenue. And if they're putting in the work, then people have to buy that. And then so the only people who know it are the ones who buy that. So it just seems like, it just kind of continues and goes on. It's not like we want our industry regulated anymore. It's not going to help us. But you brought up something when you talked about quality standards. And I think what we need to do is shift a little bit here and talk, all right, let's talk quality standards. What about labor? We're in a massive shortage in this country with good qualified working force. But in the wind industry, we've seen a shortage. And I think that has to do with the process of training. And so there's a fear that we are moving people too fast. And we all know that we're going to see that cause and effect of poorly, adequately trained individuals in the next 1 to 2 years as we're starting to see these products hit the farms and we're starting to see failures happen. And that's coming from a bad quality control process with individuals. So I kind of want to shift a little bit, Josh, from your perspective. What are you doing, for instance, as a provider? How are you working to implement training? What are you doing to bring your team up to par? Because there's not a lot of standard there either. How are you getting your team is trained as possible to not be that problem, right? In 2 years, to go back and say, it was these techs that did this, that didn't tie the blade down right, that didn't boot the boot on, that didn't do this. And that's why we have these issues now with leading edge issue or some sort of, structural damage.
Oh yeah, great question. And even to that aspect, right, that's a huge liability because when you start looking down the road 2-3 years down the line and say, well, who was up tower and who was doing the work? One of the items that we discussed earlier was the European market and what's called the GWO, the Global Wind Organization, and implementing that with our technicians here in the U.S. I saw that several years ago, and what that would provide as a whole, right? The benchmark at the time, no one really had known about it because it was still very fresh and new. But as we've grown once again to the cause of effect of, we have implications of 2030, 2050, who's going to put up the most towers, how fast can we do it? Then it gets pushed on to, once again, EPCs, ISPs. And so from my perspective, our vision here at Rangel Renewables is to leave a legacy and be a blessing. And how do you do that with the right morals and the right ethics, and actually providing a good quality individual out in the field? And so as of recent, we just got a new headquarters here in Cypress, Texas, right outside of Houston. But beautiful facility, 12,500 square feet. But to provide the basic standard training, the basic technical training, and the advanced rescue training. And then as of the next couple months, we're going to implement, and John would probably like this, the GWO blade, and what that'll look like, right? A lot of the owners, are asking, do you guys have blade techs? And that's really a facet of the industry that we're really lacking is, experienced guys, because you can't just go out there and just, hey, let me go make a quick patch of this. Do they have Bronto experience to, go up to work on these blades? And so really you have to find what is needed in the market and then provide that value back to them to say, hey, I've gone the extra measure. We're going to be providing training in-house and then producing that out into the field. A lot of times that, we experience it, guys are jumping for $1, an extra $2, and then, hey, 2 months down the line, they're calling back to see if they can grab jobs. But what are we doing differently as a whole? And, the whole discussion, right? Cradle to the grave. What are we doing differently to inspire, to provide change where the technicians, at least for Rangel Renewables, feel that they are part of the team, feel that they're part of the family, knowing that they're going to provide that change to where when no one is looking, they're doing the right thing, and they're torque and tensioning, they're checking their 10%. They're not having to do rework, and then once again providing change orders, because that's not specifically what we're in the business to do. So from a construction side, you want to go in and knock it out of the park right then and there, not, hey, we have to go provide more technicians, the project's going to extend another month or two. But as a whole, we really want to make sure that we're providing, once again, the safety, quality, production for our customers and what their expectations are.
So, Josh, do you feel from? I'm sorry, John. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, Josh just touched on something: the human side of the equation. There was a paper written by Bill Berga. Go take a look at it. Often overlooked. People jump for $1 or $2, but also more importantly than that, people will stay where they are, where they have a self-worth. And so simple little things from a lapel pin that says I've repaired 1,000 blades up tower and my repairs are valid, or whatever the story is. People will bust their butt to be that at that elevated level, whatever it is, color of shirt, label on a hat, give them something that shows that this person has been trained to a standard and has consistently achieved that standard. Does a lot for maintaining that employee's engagement. So the human part of the equation, it's a big, powerful deal. Thanks, Josh.
I agree. What about a crawfish boil, John? What do you think about that? Huh, Josh? Do you think a crawfish boil?
Barbecue, isn't it?
Heck yeah. We actually just did Chris and my brother did a barbecue for Repower in Iowa. So they did about 150 burgers in a few hours. So they really enjoyed that.
Well, one more thing, Josh. As you're dealing with the owners and for repair services, and of course, I'm a blades guy, but it works for gearboxes and everything else. Are you seeing a pushback in terms of the IP? You can't do it. Our technicians have to do it because they're specially trained. And my viewpoint is I find it a little laughable when the debris is laying on the ground and everybody can see what the heck the problem with the fleet. So I'm curious as to how often you run into that, where your techs can't be counted on to do a proper job.
Yeah, no, great question. It's happened in the past, and certainly is, unfortunately going to continue, because as an OEM or an owner, when you have your own techs on site saying, well, we've been here for the last 5 years, we know what to expect, We know what this tower is going to do. We know the metrics. We've seen the data. Then we're really there just a glorified ground hand, right? And that's not what my guys were hired to do. We want to help. We want to assist. We're not there to boss anybody around by no means. But once again, you have that human aspect where an individual has the experience and they want to do it their way. So however we can help so that we can do it safely, right? If we got to pull a blade down or there's unexpected high gust of wind, fluctuating 5 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, then all of a sudden you got a different problem on your hands. So we have experienced that, but it's once again trying to work as a team to facilitate a great outcome.
Right.
Jared, what's your thoughts on this? Because I had a question, but I wasn't sure. Maybe I read you wrong, but I thought you might have had something to say.
No, part of what makes me tick is the leadership side of things, right? And that's why I appreciate, Josh, your perspective, and John, you jumping in as well. And Josh, remind me, what's the mission of your company? Remind us.
So the vision is to leave a legacy and be a blessing. Actually, we just had some new shirts made, and I had Aaron put in the word legacy on within our icon.
Yeah, and the reason I'm highlighting this, right, is that, look, there are always going to be people that are going to make those jumps for $1 to $2 an hour. But I do firmly believe that if a company is clear on their vision and mission, and it's more than just a piece of paper on a wall, but it's actually lived, and people feel like they're part of a greater story than just a paycheck and putting just more megawatts in the ground, then I think there's something that resonates with people, right? And if leadership then ensures that each individual is recognized as they then contribute to that larger vision, I think that there's a dynamic there. And I think this is, the opportunity for the wind industry as a whole. Because again, will the fight around talent subside over the next years? I don't think so in any industry. And so what is going to set the wind industry apart? And when you think about the younger generation coming through, and I saw even some comments talking about like getting out in front of high schools and colleges, right? When you talk to the individuals that are coming through the school system now, they are very much more mission and vision focused. And so they want to join a bigger story. And so if we can tell that story compellingly and to where it's not just paper, but it's kind of what we do and it's part of how we're discussing here, then that is going to be where everyone wants to go. Why? Because again, the broader picture. And as we do that, and if we then pair it with the right focus on training, the right standards and approach, and a long-term perspective, I think that then changes the perspective from that longer-term view. And that, I think, is the role of leadership within the companies and the industry to tell that compelling story. There are great examples of this, right, from a very individual perspective. But I do think that there's a next level that the industry can use to really leverage this aspect here. So again, a bit of a tangent, but I think it's extremely relevant here because I truly do believe that the industries and the companies who win the battle of talent will have the competitive advantage. And I think wind is going to be no different.
And Jared, I definitely want to add to that. So, as Rigo knows, I'm always transparent in how I operate. But even for myself, it goes beyond, you have your techs, you want to provide a great service, you want to provide great employment, for future years to come. But where does that drive and that passion come from to become a wind technician? So I've gone even past that, right? I'm part of Kid Wind. We've gone into the local community colleges within the Bexar County area, but talking to kids in first, second, third, fourth grade, right? Providing that inspiration, that hope where everyone, comes from a different background, but not just going saying, hey, we need 20, 30, 40, 50 people, and this project's going to be 6 months. But what are we doing as a community when we talk about, that individual that is present, that's, hey, what is it that brought us to Rangel Renewables or to some of the other competitors, right? And from that aspect, knowing that you want to provide that insight of what we're doing now, because as Rigo's saying, right, you have guys that are 5 years ago that the technology is obsolete, but providing that insight and giving, expertise on what we're doing now to where then as they're going into the collegiate level and what they want to do full time, then if it's going to be engineering, project management, technicians, site leadership, all those aspects are really important when you're looking at the overall growth and sustainability of what you're trying to do long term.
Yeah, Josh, it's really great for you to mention KidWins. I forget the gentleman's name. I was involved with that many years ago and spent with community outreach in my area to the elementary schools, fourth graders especially. It is the easiest sale to an instructor because the wind industry has got everything in it. You need to study weather, dynamics, energy production, all of the disciplines of science can be touched there, but also a significant amount of community outreach to high schools for career days. And again, it is the easiest sale. There's something sexy about wind and renewable power. It may be a love it or hate it relationship, but when people hear that you have the opportunity, if you're with a manufacturer, you can end up traveling the world to the manufacturing plants. If you want to stay stateside, but you want to see the states, man, you hook up with a guy like Josh, and he's going to be sending you all over the place in some of the most beautiful and remote areas of the country.
No, absolutely.
Thanks for mentioning that. That's a powerful tool.
And it's just another aspect to how we've grown, right? And the opportunities that we have been able now to provide. Like I said, I've been in this industry since 2008, and my children have grown up in this. We've built a business in this. Our family works in it. My son came out of the Army, is now a wind technician, is working in the industry himself. So, I mean, yes, there's so many beautiful things that come from this, which is why I'm passionate about wanting to really create that thought leadership. And Jared, I'm in line with you, and it's always why you and I have clicked, but our passion for leadership and it coming down to how we develop and build our teams and where we look at what we're doing and saying, you know, we're going to do things because it's the right thing to do. We're going to lead this way. We're going to even build our business in this way. There's a lot of amazing companies out there doing incredible things. There was a comment that said earlier, not everybody has the resources. They're not abundant. And I think we have a lot to learn. And in no way are we using this platform to beat anybody up, but more to bring out and raise real questions, because somebody has to get the ball started. So is it as simple as possibly from the ground level of creating good mentorship and leadership programs in building the next and up and coming workforce, from the innovators to the folks that are executing and delivering on building these wind farms and putting them together, to the next designer? Is that where we need to start, or is that always a responsibility? I feel it is. And then to the level of, you know, is it the asset owners that now say, look, really the buck stops with us. We have to demand this level of quality. We have to not push this hard on an OEM, and we have to give our ISPs enough time to properly train and get their service teams to where they need to be. I don't know. I'd love a quick opinion on this, and then I want to give you guys the opportunity to give a last word as we wrap this up and stay within our hour for everyone. So, Jared, would you like to take this?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts there, Rigo.
Yeah, there's a lot. I'm not gonna lie. That was
yeah. But let me just focus on this. I think the point around the leadership, I think absolutely it's fundamental, and that's where we need to start, or not start, but continue, right? I do think that the name of the game will be an appreciation or empathy for other individuals within the industry and their view, right? So I don't think we're going to inspire certain parts of the industry by saying, hey, look, you guys need to really step up your game and quit giving us, you know, garbage, just to use an example of like the turbine OEMs and some of the language I've heard in the past of that regard. I think we have to be more inspiring. I think we have to understand the different perspectives. But I do think that those owner operators, because they have the long-term view, will need to drive what they want to see long-term. And there are ways to incentivize different dynamics, but I think that has to be an ongoing discussion. And it's not something that you can do with the stroke of the pen. It will require a longer term view, working together, getting to a better future.
Couldn't agree more. John, what's your final thoughts on that one?
Jared, that's
did he do it for
really, really nice. And to give the leadership the support they need to make those decisions, to make those pushes, to change the direction, they need data. And I'm back to the cradle-to-grave data. From a gearbox comes out of the plant, we don't need to know all your IP. We need to know some basic features of it. When the blade walks out the door and there's an obvious repair patch on it, the owner needs to know, what was it? Was it a deep repair, surface repair? That's all they need to know. They don't need to know your ply counts or any of the rest of that secret IP stuff. And for the smaller operators who don't have a lot of resources, cradle-to-grave data, it should be automatic. Nobody with a piece of paper or typing in an Excel sheet. That's we're way past that technology-wise.
Well, are you sure?
We should be.
Are you sure? A lot of folks still live and die on the Excel hill, bro. Like, I'm just telling you. Remember, I'm a consultant now. It's insane. I'm like, wow. There's an app for that. But it's all good. I'm gonna go there. Are you sure, John? But you know what? You're getting into something here quick. Josh, I want to give you a final word as well.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely going to agree with you, Jared, the leadership and what we're providing for, everyone around us, right? It's once again doing the right thing, making sure that everyone's doing it at a safe level, but also, within the quality control, as John stated, what technology is going out that's going to be successful, that's going to hit the data that's required to, have these towers up and running at, at full scale. I know Rigo had touched base on this earlier. You're having a 1.5 megawatt, but running at a 1.2, what's really going on there? So really just starts with those that are in leadership to making sure that we're doing the right things in the field.
Well, awesome. Excuse me. I want to thank all you guys again for being here. I love doing these programs. I love doing live programs for the simple fact that we get to be authentic and we get to have an open discussion and just have a real discussion. No blame, but asking some questions, maybe sometimes getting a little too far on one end, but finding that we all share a responsibility in this. And I think we're all happy to be here, very much so, and we want to see it better. And I'm just really, really grateful for this opportunity to bring this out to you guys. For those of you guys watching, continue to drop in. If you guys want more information like this, let us know. I also want to thank our sponsor, Airtonomy. Airtonomy understands that this level of thought leadership is important in the industry, and they're the leader of enterprise scale autonomous robotics today, working with delivering precise inspection services. And these things matter, I think, today. So when we talk about data and we talk about cradle to grave and understanding this, I believe is important. And so when they asked me, hey, would you be willing to do this and create thought leadership, talk about things in our industry that matter, I was excited to do it. And so I'm proud to work with them because they're not saying, here, sell us. They're saying, create conversation that people want to talk about, and we'd love to see it and hear what people have to say. That's the kind of leadership that I like. That's the kind of focus that I really inspire to do. We've never let anybody sponsor a program before, and we were happy to do it when they said it. So I'm glad that they have helped us out here. And again, gentlemen, I'm so glad that you're here. From you, the audience, I want to know more. We have 2 more parts of this discussion as we get further in, and we want to dig as deep as we can in. A lot of stuff got brought up. Maybe we need to get into some stuff around insurances. I mean, there's a lot of stuff behind the scenes that could very well be changing how we understand cradle-to-grave data and how we can better ourselves as an industry. But anyways, you guys, thank you all so much for being here. John, Jared, Josh, I am so grateful. Thank you.
Thanks, Rigo.
Absolutely.
Thank you much.
You guys, thank you so much. I appreciate it again for you guys taking the time and the hour to be here with me and my guest today. Again, my name is Rigo Murillo, and I want to bid you a great farewell. God bless. I will see you again. We do our programs weekly on our program with our Lunch Talk series as we get into leadership and mentorship. But we will be back here again in 1 month for part 3 of this discussion as we get further into the technical aspect of what we do. You guys have a great rest of your day. Have a powerful week, and we'll talk to you soon.